Hello, everyone. Apologies for the slight delay.
I can give you a very brief
Yes.
introduction. Thank you for coming. And I think a lot of people here have already been to other talks, so thank you for coming again. And especially thank you for coming on a Friday night. This is a good start. We'll see. This is the last event of our 2024 edition of Bletchley Park Week. We're talking a lot about computing in all of its different forms, and this year's edition was on ethics. And we had a lot of very interesting talks in this one, the last one in this series. All of the other talks are recorded, so is this. Also, that means for you, if you have any questions and you don't want to be recorded, maybe ask them later. There will be during some. But if you don't mind being recorded, we will have a Q&A session at the end, or if you want questions during the talk.
Feel free to stop me during the talk, or talk to me afterwards, or send me a hate mail, anything.
Anyway, now please enjoy this talk by Andreas Tsamados.
Thank you. All right. So, cryptography. First of all, let me introduce myself really briefly. I'm a PhD student. I'm in my third year here at the University of Oxford, specifically at the Oxford Internet Institute. So you might get a quick sense during my talk that I'm putting a little bit of internet propaganda in there. And I'm working, my thesis is on the use of AI systems in hacking operations, both defensive and offensive operations. And it takes ethical angle, a philosophical angle of human control. How do humans actually control those incredible machines that we're all enjoying nowadays? And you'll see that the theme is also quite consistent with what we're talking about today, which is the history of modern day cryptography. Although I am not a native English speaker, I did not make a mistake with the at over there. This is what I meant to actually write. Why cryptography at war? Simply because it's been at war with itself, or never left to rest and be enjoyed by people. There's always been tension between states, between people and their government, etc. So we're looking a bit at that today. Now, for the lawyers in the room, I apologize for baiting you with dual use term over there. I will not be going into the nitty-gritty of export control for cryptographic products. Instead, what I want to do today is actually I want to give what I think is a much needed and accessible account of the history of cryptography as a political tool, from national defense to civil resistance. Now, the legal term here, just quickly, refers to items or technologies that can be applied both to military applications and civilian applications. So in this talk, I swear I'm going to the next slide. In this talk, I'll cover a few things. First, I'll go over the history of cryptography very briefly. I'll quickly jump to the 20th century developments in cryptography, specifically public key cryptography, the impact it had on the world, the impact it had in shifting global power dynamics and actually changing the relationship between citizens and their governments. And then I'll conclude my talk with a few examples on how cryptography has been used both as a tool of repression and oppression, and as a tool for people to actually fight for their rights, combat oppressive regimes, and also just coordinate better globally. So I did not want to start originally as far back as the ancient Greeks, but I think it would be a mistake not to mention a few things we know from the Greeks. Yes, I'm Greek. No, I'm not biased. But cryptography is the art of secret communication. And like for all art, the Greek had something to do with it and actually set some important precedents that have influenced centuries that follow. So my oldest example here is from 12th century BC, and it's a story recounted by Homer, which talks about Bellerophon, who was sent carrying some, how do you say it in English? Was sent carrying to Lycia some deadly signs that were folded into tablets, and he unwittingly actually carried his own death sentence to that location because he couldn't read. So when you go as far back as the 12th century BC, cryptography can also mean just everyday writing, because not many people actually knew how to read, or it was something that was quite uncommon. So that's my oldest example. My second example is on Cytos, I think you say in English, from the 4th century BC. Basically, it was the oldest cipher ever recorded, and it was used by Spartan military commanders to exchange secret communication with their troops. Now, the final example is simply to introduce a new word, which is steganography, which is the art of concealing secret information within an otherwise mundane message or physical object. And for this, there is this story I quite like from the ruler of Miletus, who shaved his slave's head in order to tattoo a secret message on their head and wait for the hair to grow back. And he would send that slave, in this particular story, from Persia to Greece to get the Greeks to revolt. And so when he arrived in Greece, they shaved his head, read the message, and let the poor guy go. Actually, they didn't. He was a slave. Now, quick jump to the 20th century. The CIA is very keen on these types of methods, and actually during the whole of the 20th century they were using steganography using animals' carcasses, and their favorite animals, fun fact, were the pigeons and the rats. So now for the serious stuff. One consistent theme up to the 20th century, when you look at the history of cryptography, is that it was mainly a tool for the powerful, by the powerful. So it was kings, military commanders, warlords, and diplomats that were using cryptography and using secret keys to encrypt their missives. Not only was it not common for the common people because it was too complicated to use, or required a lot of education or effort, resources, etc. On top of that, the powerful were making sure that this magical tool remained as secret as possible. So here we have a spread from Giambattista della Porta, sorry for the accent, from the 17th century, a polymath and a Renaissance man, if there ever was one, who describes in his bestseller Natural Magic, as well as his famous encyclopedic work and book on cryptography, his search for the secrets of nature, while telling readers that the secrets of cryptography ought to be concealed for great men and princes only. Now, I jump a little bit forward to the 20th century. What cryptography continues to be used then mainly by governments and in intelligence and counterintelligence operations. There are two groundbreaking developments that occur and that I want to cover quickly today. So the first one, because most of you probably attended rest of the week, or at least one of those talks, I will not go deeply into the Enigma saga. I know my place. So just briefly, it's the world's first programmable digital computer that came out from the cryptanalysis of the Enigma. It's the invention of computers as we know them today, and the information communication revolution that it triggered. Now, the second breakthrough is public key cryptography, which is what I want to spend a little bit more time on. The reason why I consider it a breakthrough, in a quick sentence, no worries, is it made the power of cryptography actually more accessible and easier to spread on a global scale. Before I can actually talk to you about public key cryptography, I think it's important that we quickly talk about the key distribution problem. So there is one major problem in using cryptography. I touched on it a little bit in the second slide, which is what? Which is that you need to actually distribute the keys to the intended entities, meaning you need to have a secure communication channel already. And how do we get Alice a key without somebody actually subverting the process of giving that key? It can happen through stealing, replacing the keys, preventing distribution. All those things require a lot of operational setup. It's a difficult thing to do, even for the military. You can hide the keys, you can think of smart ways of doing so. But again, it's a prohibitive task for the average Joe, and even complicated for militaries. I'll go a bit faster. Yeah. Now, by the 1960s, that problem of key distribution was already prominent. James Ellis was at the time in the eavesdropping agency, the British eavesdropping agency, the GCHQ, acknowledged that with the establishment and the spread of tactical radio, actually managing all those keys for every secure communication around the country and beyond was a very complex issue. And as he was looking for solutions, he finds this 1944 work by a Bell technician called Walter Koenig, who suggested a very smart theoretical way of securing telephone communication by having the recipient of a call add noise to the call. Meaning, if Alice calls Bob, Bob adds sound noise to the call so that a third party cannot hear anything. Alice can't hear anything, Bob can't hear anything either. Once the call has been made, they can remove that noise that they added to the call. And this was the seed, let's say, to public key cryptography. Now, a few years later, a young man, 22-year-old young man called Clifford Cox makes the discovery of an algorithm based on a beautiful mathematical formula or proof that involved crunching large prime numbers into a one-way function. He called it non-secret encryption. The discovery had immediate impact on military communications. The GCHQ scrambled for a little bit and decided to keep it secret. And for the next 2 decades, it was one of their most prized secrets. Yet, neither the GCHQ nor the NSA had turned the theoretical possibility of non-secret encryption into a practical algorithm or cryptographic product. Instead, they just shelved it and developed side products. A quick background reference here. It is the Cold War, so we're at the height of intelligence, counterintelligence, spy operations, etc. So those secrets were kept even, the paranoia was even more tangible. Quick note on export controls at the time. There were two types of technologies that were protected. One is technology associated with weapons of war under category munitions. And the other is dual-use technology with civilian and commercial applications. Encryption technology, techniques, equipment, and software was included under category 13 into the US munitions list that was managed not by the Department for Commerce, but actually the state, how do the Americans call it? State, by the military. So, and by the 60s, the export controls that were already in place began already to clash with commercial interests, especially in the US, from companies that were slowly developing what we now know as electronic commerce, internet commerce, etc. Public key cryptography. So in 1976, and I swear there are two more slides on the blah blah of basic cryptography and why it's important, and then we'll go into the more provocative part of the talk. So in 1976, Diffie and Hellman claimed that the development of computer control communication networks promises effortless and inexpensive contact between people or computers on opposite sides of the world. As they would replace mail and many excursions, we needed to find a way to replicate secure properties that you had before that with paper contracts. So signing, sealing, secure mailing, and recognizable even writing. The paper instrument needed to be digitally reproduced, and this was the basic premise, the premise of their work. So they offered at that time a theoretical solution, but had not found yet the mathematical function that actually implemented the scheme. It was only a year later that Ron Rivest, Adi Shamir, and Leonard Adamant, RSA, which will be a recurrent acronym in this talk and in your life probably, which suggested that the public encryption key could contain the product and private key would contain the two primes. So what was the thinking? The thinking was that based on two very large prime numbers that could be hundreds of digits long, the numbers could easily be multiplied, but it would be nearly impossible to reverse the step and identify which two large prime numbers were used to actually create that function. So multiplications took seconds, and refactoring took millions of years, even with the best computers in the world, even with today's computers. This is the easiest diagram I could find. It's from Wikipedia. Basically, just to give you a quick idea of what it looks like. I'm Alice, maybe I'm Bob. I have a public key and a private key. I tell the whole world, hey, here's my public key. I broadcast it through radio, through the internet, whatever. And I keep my private key private. Now, Alice wants to communicate with me, but wants to make sure that she doesn't need to come and hand me the actual key for us to decrypt each other's communication. So what does Alice do? She uses her private key to encrypt the message she wants to send me, and uses my public key and the two keys together in order to actually produce an encrypted text that she can communicate to me. And only I will be able to decrypt it because I have the private key to the public key of mine that she used. Voila. So, censorship and sparks of civil resistance. Maybe a quick note about civil resistance. Civil resistance is basically a way for people to fight for their rights, their freedom, and for justice without the use of violence. So when people wage civil resistance, they might use tactics such as strikes, they might use boycotts, mass protests, and other non-violent actions to withdraw their cooperation from an oppressive system. By the way, I tend to blabber a little bit, so please give me signs if I'm over time. So in April 1977, the MIT trio we just talked about releases their technical memo to a group of private reviewers. Within the group of private reviewers is a man who works at the Scientific American and actually decides to publish part of their technical memo and describes it in the Scientific American as a new kind of cipher that would take millions of years to break. This sent shivers down the spine of the NSA, not the USA, the NSA. Over 7,000 letters immediately flooded the lab of the MIT trio with researchers, activists, journalists, and even foreign governments asking for access to that cryptographic algorithm. What follows is a relentless, decades-long attempt by the American spy agency, the National Security Agency, to threaten academics, threaten publishers, censor any attempt at publishing this kind of cryptographic work. They would issue gag orders, they would defund universities, and even try to censor the National Science Foundation. For those spies agencies, the problem was that the discovery of this algorithm would make their sources go dark. This slogan is something you'll continue to hear for the next 20 years, is my guess. It's a favorite of the GCHQ and of the NSA. It's the fear of going dark, of our enemies going dark and not being able, we wouldn't be able anymore to actually listen to their communications. So this sparked a small resistance movement. First among academics calling for the freedom of science, of doing research, and of expression, then activists and journalists, etc. These efforts by the NSA had the opposite effect for many. It confirmed their worldview that that you should distrust Washington's secret machinations. I'll remind you that at the same time, 5 years ago, maybe a little bit more, you had the leaked Pentagon papers, you had Watergate, you had Beat Generations and hippies smoking weed in the middle of the US Capitol and actually getting the government to divest from their global war machinery. And you had also 10, 15 years prior the civil rights movement. So the population was very distrustful of the government at the time. Crypto and computers on the ground. We're getting to the end part now in a second. So David Chown, actually, let me start differently. In the following years, what I just described, more cryptographers start actually working on crypto products and crypto algorithms. Opposite effect of what the spy agencies were hoping. And the fear of government is not actually the only reason, nor the main reason for a lot of those people. David Chown is a good example of that. What he feared is that automation of the way we pay for goods, services, etc., was going to rob individuals of the ability to monitor and control the ways information about them is used. So what did Chown do? He started working on some of the most important pieces of technologies of our time. He started working on untraceable electronic mail, digital pseudonyms, anonymous credentials, general protection of privacy, blind signatures, which I would categorize also as an important cryptographic revolution or revolution in cryptography, which the idea behind it is simply to hide content of a message before the signature is added. And this can be helpful for digital voting, for example. He was a bit more passionate about digital cash, actually, and privacy guarantees you could get from interacting with merchants without having anyone snoop on when, why, how much, what did you do, did you have your cat with you, etc. So these ideas were very powerful, and they gave rise to an entire movement, one that believed that cryptography was making the state as we know it obsolete. And this gave rise to the famous or infamous cypherpunks and cryptography's spread. So let me check which date actually. In 1988, Timothy May publishes a crypto-anarchist manifesto. Some of the ideas in there are quite radical. One says that the idea that cryptography allows us to claim cyberspace for ourselves and not abide by unfair laws is very important. The second is that, and this is maybe a bit more far-fetched, technology itself and not humans would make violence obsolete. So that new technology, public key cryptography, was literally seen as second coming of Jesus Christ. Okay, we don't need to rely on each other anymore to stop violence or live peacefully together. We have cryptographic tools that can impose better coordination at a global scale. So what happened when people started realizing these things is that, one, the world is quickly changing and being computerized, and information is becoming king. And second, that this new computer-mediated world was an opportunity to start fresh, with better guarantees of freedom of expression, of association, etc. And if we didn't start fresh, the powerful would do so for us on our behalf and to create something much worse. In 1991, Phil Zimmerman publishes a PGP crypto system, still exists today, very powerful, is distributed all over the internet. It's still a little bit clunky, but it basically allows the average Joe to use public key cryptography, have a public key, a private key, and encrypt their communication with others. Its distribution quickly raised the alarms in the Pentagon, and it was the first major individual level challenge to control of experts, controlling the expert of cryptography. In 1992, the Cypherpunks, which is a portmanteau term for Cypherpunks, began organizing via mailing lists, and that included military people, scholars, lawyers, radical libertarians, etc. Now, what followed in the next decade is advocacy from the cypherpunks, more and more people following the mailing list or getting forward of that mailing list through someone else. And the people within the cypherpunks started experimenting with what they considered very important developments for society. One of them was try to get PGP and public key cryptography to as many people as possible. Another was Blacknet, which was a tool for trading information in all its forms, meaning insider information on your company. You want to sell me some information about your boss's daughter. You want to sell me some information about any kind of information could be sold. And this quickly gave rise to the dark side of actually allowing for these new types of freedom, which is you had assassination markets and betting markets that were being attempted and that emerged and were quickly shut down by the government. In '93, probably the biggest mistake by the US government at the time, Bill Clinton tries to introduce something called Clipper chips, which ensures that when two devices establish a secure communication, the law enforcement can actually snoop in and figure out what is happening, but nobody else. This was a tipping point for a lot of people. So what was initially, activists, researchers, etc., now it became a bigger part of the US population that was participating, especially in San Francisco, on rejecting those attempts by the governments to snoop on them. You would have a huge rise of graffitis in San Francisco, where it was written, careful, big brother in here, and some more aggressive stuff that I'll keep for myself. They abandoned that idea in 1996, and at the same time, there was a liberalization of export controls on encryption, and things started to relax from there onwards. But there is a theme that continues, and that was started because of that Clipper idea by Bill Clinton. And this is the tension between security and freedom of expression and association. The idea that you can create a golden backdoor just for the government to use in secret communication sounds like a great idea. Only the good guys can actually look at what the bad guys are talking about. But actually, it makes communication simply insecure to even other bad actors who can leverage that secret golden key that was left there for law enforcement. So from the moment you create that backdoor for the government, for law enforcement, you know that a Russian hacker, you know that Guatemalan activist that wants to harm the US government might be able to use that backdoor for themselves. Okay. Long story just to talk about public key cryptography. I think I've established a lot of the important parts and why this is a revolutionary technology. Now let's look at what has happened since. So the technology spread. It started being used for securing your internet communications. Netscape introduced something called SSL to secure communications and secure online payments, etc. People would start using PGP much more. And yet, if you look around the world in the past 20 years, what you see is that Yeah, there is no shortage of example of cryptography being used either by some of the most important civil resistance movements in the past 2 decades, or when there was a lack of encryption in those movements, you would see the contrary, which is oppressive regimes actually using that lack of everyday protection and privacy against their own population. So just to name a few, it's not only authoritarian regimes, on the contrary, on YouTube, on the contrary, actually, the Americans are probably the worst actor when it comes to snooping on the globe. In this image, you see, so, sorry, let me start with the list. So from the Arab Spring, so in the Arab Spring, we had a lot of examples of people coordinating on social media using cryptography to their advantage to actually congregate when it was impossible to do so, and everybody knew the government was spying on them. In 2013, Snowden's revelations give us, among other things, this amazing little doodle by some NSA analysts that describe how they're using their own techniques to bypass strong cryptographic guarantees that Google was providing to their users and internally to their own systems. So this little smiley you see there under SSL added and removed here actually enraged a whole generation of computer scientists and developers who realized at that time, okay, in the past 10 years, we didn't hear that much about civil resistance movements using public key cryptography. This is a rebirth. This is a great reminder for us that this is very serious. We're constantly being spied on, and there are repercussions to that. Areas in which you don't have strong cryptographic guarantees, I would say that the Chinese social credit system is possible because those guarantees do not exist for the average Chinese citizens. Taiwan's sunflower movement actually was driven by a group of hackers. I can't remember their name now, but that were spreading public key cryptography tools to the rest of the population, organizing online voting and online solidarity and mutual aid forums, all that by using very strong cryptography and not allowing the state to actually repress the movement. More recently, you have a lot of targeted surveillance tools that have been used against journalists, political activists, and that has led to a lot of deaths. These come mainly from either Italian, mainly Israeli cybersecurity companies that have been exporting that to the rest of the world. And this is my last point before I go into two quick case studies or just examples, is that it is also very relevant for what is happening today with AI. So behavior manipulation, identity theft, tracking online, mass surveillance, knowing the name of your cat, what time they eat, how it affects your own mood, if you might be gay or not, disclosing that to your parents because an algorithm made the determination, yes, you are, and so we should start advertising some products for you, or whether you're pregnant or not, those technologies are used against you to actually manipulate your behavior, and all that is possible because your information, your data, your everyday data is clearly accessible by anyone, both companies and governments. Now, I'll go into the two last examples. But before that, a quick note on interdependence and interconnection. Cryptography and public key cryptography is not that powerful if you're the only one using it. Okay, so this is a technology that requires concerted effort by people. If I'm the only person in this room that is actually using end-to-end encryption for my communication, I'll be the one easy target for whoever is freaked out about secret communication, because they'll see that, oh, I'm absent. If we all use it, we're all much better off. And more specifically, even if I'm the best cryptographer in the world, I do everything that I need to do in order to keep myself secret, because I'm friends with some of you, or because my mother uses Facebook almost daily, there is proxy data that is completely sufficient to actually de-anonymize me and identify me and oppress me, whatever. Now, this was supposed to be a little gift, doesn't matter. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. I'm giving you two examples and I'm concluding this talk. Why Bitcoin? Bitcoin uses a lot of the cryptographic breakthroughs that we discussed today, and many others. And what the advocates for Bitcoin, including Chom back in the days with digital cash, was that if you want to actually resist an oppressive government, one way of doing it is actually cutting the funding that it enjoys. Either you don't pay taxes, quite risky, or you make sure that you don't transact with the currency of that country, and you actually use outside currency. This is also used to escape failing of a specific state or national currency. In Turkey, but also Argentina, you have a quarter of the population more that is using cryptocurrencies on a daily basis. It also allows you to regain anonymity over your purchases. For example, if anybody is using Revolut today, or N26, or just online banking, your information, your purchases, do not enjoy the level of privacy you had with cash. Meaning there are thousands of data brokers that every day look at what you buy, to whom you send the money, and what you do with it, and what it says about you, and how it impacts your insurance, etc. This is also a great way of interacting with people globally, so not only communication, but also transaction with people globally. And a quick note, there are new experiment and group dynamics going on here. One that is particularly exciting is called multisigs, multi-signature votes, which allow a group of people that don't know each other, take a subreddit group, for example, that want to actually coordinate, share money with each other, without one person or two people being able to take that money for themselves. Why? Because there is a threshold. I'm finished. So, last 2 points. The next one is Tor. Tor is what people know today as the dark web. It's a tool that actually allows you to anonymize your internet traffic. It uses a bunch of cryptographic tools, but also a network of volunteer relayers that anonymize your traffic. Why is it important? Because it's not about only encrypting your content, your everyday communication. It's about encrypting when you send your message, to whom, from where, at what time, etc. Why is it so important? Because this little jokester here, the former director of the NSA, infamously said, we kill people based on metadata, and he's not joking. Okay. quick graphs. I swear it's going to take a minute. This is when the war in Ukraine starts. You see that people connecting directly to Tor from Russia drop significantly at that time. And on the other side, what starts increasing is people that are using better cryptographic tools to actually access that same network or Tor through either OBFS4 or Snowflake. You see that the government very quickly, the Russian government very quickly reacts and tries to shut down those tools. And then you have an online competition between cryptographers and the Russian cryptographers to see who can best the other. Within a few days, you have 170,000 people in Russia that have viewed blog posts explaining how to become anonymous even when you live in a country like Russia. And this is not just for people to take risks and try to be anonymous for themselves. It's also for helping the internal civil society. So this group reached out to Tor and said, hey, we think that the Russian government have been illegally censoring their population. And Tor responded, yeah, okay, but it's Russia. So what? Anyways, a few months later, that legal firm actually wins in court against the Russian government, and a few changes happen from there on. Russia decides to, okay, since we can't do that properly, censorship properly on the internet, we're going to use choke points like people's banks and getting people's banks to spy on them and tell on them. Same thing for Iran. Later on, protest starts, you see an explosion of people actually connecting to Tor and bypassing government censorship. And this was made possible specifically by Snowflake, which is a browsing add-on. And I'll stop here with just a quick call to action, which is it's your turn now. If you want to protect yourself, do so. Why? Because it helps protect others that might need it much more. Here are some tools. Don't use WhatsApp anymore or Telegram. Signal is a great tool. It encrypts your metadata as well. Use Brave as an alternative browser, which blocks advertisers, blocks all type of tracking, and gives you an explanation also how. Tor, I just explained. Kutch is to replace Slack or Workspace. Snowflake, you can add it to your browser. It's an extension. It's very simple. You don't even know that it's running, but you're allowing people from around the world to route their traffic through you to bypass their internal national censorship. This is great. This is an image of the Hong Kong protesters and the tools that we're using against cameras, etc. Blah blah. Thank you very much. Sorry, I ate over virtually.
It's a bit, we're a bit far away, but please, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now. But thank you very much for that. It's been very, very interesting. I'm going to start off with a question from Andreas. So you described a few tools specifically used, how we can protect ourselves. But I'd be really interested to hear what can people who are not informed about this, because I think there is a bit of a difference between the types of people that know about resistance strategies and the types of people who are actually most likely to be employed and don't like the strategies to fight against them. So how can we protect those people most effectively?
Yes, so first is advocacy. This is why also I'm giving the talk today. It's incredibly inaccessible, all the information about cryptography, about anti-surveillance, anti-censorship, etc. So if you learn anything from this talk, please talk to your neighbor, please talk to your friend, tell them to use Signal, tell them to use Brave. Those are tools that are one-click download. You have the same experience you have with your favorite tools today, like WhatsApp, Messenger, etc. So advocacy and the other, I would say, those very simple tools that have finally emerged and that your average Joe can use.
I'll tell everyone. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, so my question is about WhatsApp. You mentioned that WhatsApp is not secure. When I open WhatsApp, it says that we have got end-to-end encryption between the sender and receiver. When do I stop believing the published owner of the software? And when do I start believing it? Because Signal, like you said, use Signal. But Signal could have a similar, not defect, but signal policy, or could be forced upon by the government of that country to allow them decryption. So where does it stop? That I stop believing WhatsApp, because even though it says I'm encrypted, I'm not. And Signal, it says I'm unencrypted. So in terms of the bold statement in the front, both are saying the same thing.
Great question. So WhatsApp has end-to-end encryption for your content, meaning nobody can actually snoop onto what you actually wrote to the other person. What they don't have is encryption of metadata. Who you are, what time you sent the message, to whom, when did they receive it, from what location. This is information that surrounds your actual content. And going back to the NSA director, this is all they need to oppress, kill, repress, etc. So this is for the difference. Now, who do you trust is difficult. Cryptography has this amazing magical property, which is it allows you to actually produce proofs that are undeniable, that are mathematical, about the security or the guarantees you're getting. If you're not a cryptographer, you can't access that. You need to trust some people. So just as a heuristic, I would say, I just personally, I trust a little bit less billion-dollar company that has as an incentive to make profit every year, as opposed to a non-profit that has gathered some of the best cryptographers in the world, and that is based purely on donations, and where I know that most of the academics around the world consider that the golden standard for good communication and secure communication. So, yeah.
Yes. How relevant and effective do you think technologies such as Signal and Snowflake are against upcoming technologies such as quantum computing and communications?
Also a great question. So Signal just released a patch, I think, a week ago, and they're now quantum resistant. Quantum resistance is something that is quite embryonic, let's say, but we kind of know what are the properties needed for our cryptographic algorithms and our communications to actually resist the possibility that in 10 years, the NSA will have a quantum computer that can break all type of public key encryption.
I wanted to ask about other governments and how easy it is to find out what's going on. You traced quite a lot about the United States. You mentioned Iran and China. What's the accessibility to an academic like you of what's going on in countries that have perhaps quite a strong reason to stop you finding out what they're doing?
It's an amazing question. If this was my thesis defense, I would start sweating. So there are a few elements to my answer. The first is that you can rely on people within the country to actually be able to broadcast some information. You can be the most oppressive country in the world. If you have a significant population, some information is bound to leak and come out. A lot of the academics I know today working on information controls actually use data from people that are leaking from inside. The other part of the answer is that you don't necessarily need to know that much. As long as you know that people are not able to communicate from within that country to outside countries, it's enough, at least for me, for my work to be focused on, I need to make sure that my tools that would allow them to communicate with the outside world reaches them. So I don't necessarily need them to reach me, but I want for sure to reach them. And for that, there are a lot of very smart techniques. For example, I'll just give one very quickly, which is domain fronting. It's something that is used quite cleverly by Tor. And the concept is as follows. Even Russia, even China, want to make sure that some websites are accessible for their population. They want people to be able to access maybe Google or Amazon or some big tech company that has become almost synonymous to the internet. If you want to use the internet, you're touching some Amazon servers, even if you're in China. And what Tor is doing is they're hiding your traffic or my traffic, so from within the country or outside the country, as Amazon traffic. So they use a cryptographic technique that says to the Chinese government, hey, this person is Amazon. Amazon is trying to communicate with this individual in the country. You're not gonna block Amazon. If you block Amazon, you're 40% of your internet is breaking, basically. So you pretend that you're Amazon, and this is one way that you can do a good secure communication. Final part to my answer, maybe it's a bit hors sujet, how do you say that? Outside, but tangential. There is this saying, but actually it's a fact known by political scientists. If you can get 3.5% of any population to engage in civil resistance, in non-violent action, historically, that has always been sufficient to get either government toppled, to get major reform, etc. 3.5% of the population is enough if they engage in civil resistance to actually get there. So all those tools are a great way to ensure that at least a strong minority can be made and can find each other and coordinate. And,
All right, maybe one more question if anyone wants to.
You briefly talked about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So I'm curious what technologies you're most excited about coming from this industry that we call crypto now, that's associated with, a lot with financial speculation, but there's a lot of interesting tech that's coming out from it as well. Financial, non-financial, maybe like ZK things.
Yeah. There are a few that are very exciting, actually. One is, I really think we've upgraded in the past 2-3 years the ability for global coordination through a tool called multi-signature, which allows 10 people to get together. They set a rule that of us 10, we need at least 6 people to sign something for money in our vault to be used. So they all put money in the same vault. They know that nobody else can take the money, but now they're a group of 10 that can coordinate and have material impact on the world by having this mechanism of dispersing or using money and actually buying stuff, impacting the world. But with the reassurance that even if I don't know anything about those 9 other people, I can coordinate with them in a new, very smart way. Another very cool tool that is emerging, it comes from cryptography, but it's used, I think the first experiments have been in cryptocurrencies. It's called zero knowledge proof. Quick version of that is Anybody played Where is Waldo? Where is Waldo? Waldo? Yeah. For those who don't know, it's a picture with a lot of people, a chaotic scene, and you need to find one little character. Zero knowledge proof allows you to show to your neighbor or to anyone, hey, I found Waldo, without actually showing them where Waldo is. You can generate a proof that you know something or own something. So I can prove that I'm an American citizen, or I can prove that I own a Ferrari without actually showing the Ferrari or showing my passport. This is a very powerful tool, and I think that we'll start seeing applications emerge very quickly. Those two.
All right, thank you all very much for your questions, and thanks again for your talk. There's drinks now, so if you have more questions, please just on your hand. And then
Yeah.